I'm very glad to be with you tonight, everybody. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about what's happening in Israel. Fortunately, for the first time in 1.5 years, I can talk about politics with a little bit certainty, because for 1.5 years, we were not sure where is it going. We had 3 elections in a row. And finally, this week, 2 days ago, a new government was sworn in. Finally, and then I'm saying finally because it's so important to end the quagmire that was here for so many months. And Israel needed a stable government. About the stability, we can argue that, of course, but it's much better than it was 2 weeks ago. It was impossible to do anything in Israel. If you any one of you guys are having business here or doing business here in Israel, or trying to do business here in Israel, you probably notice how hard it was in the past year to get any kind of answers from Israeli government. So I'm going to give you a brief picture about how a brief report about how Israeli politics look like today. And I'm going to answer every question you have. Please feel free to write, ask, even, re-ask, whatever, follow up on every question you have. I'm here to answer anything you want to ask, and I'll try to give you the widest picture that there is regarding Israel today, 2020, in the last moments of COVID-19, because we are feeling much better than we were 1 month ago. So I'm gonna share my short but I hope clear presentation that I prepared for this night. So we'll start with the new national unity government. It's named the national unity government, but we can argue that, and we can talk about it later if you want. Still, it's between 2 parties that ran head to head 3 times, and they weren't able to form a government alone. So Netanyahu tried to have 61 in April last year, and then in September, and then in March this year, and he wasn't able to form his 61. He dreamed about his 61 in the Knesset, but he didn't have that. Benny Gantz had 62 and 65 in September, but with the numbers that he had, he couldn't form a government because, and now we have to talk about it because that's the elephant in the room, the Arab parties have no legitimacy here in Israel to be part of, to say that we have a new national unity government where Netanyahu, Mr. Netanyahu, is the prime minister for the first 1.5 years, and then Mr. Gantz is going to replace him, and probably we'll have a new prime minister in 1.5 years from now. It is the first time in 10 years or even 11 years that the idea of having Mr. Netanyahu out of the office is forming somehow in Israelis mind. But still, politics are politics. You all know things can change, and Netanyahu earned in the past few years, he earned a bad reputation regarding his good name and what it is worse for. So the government exists, and you're asking yourselves, how come after 1.5 years of really hard war that these guys had, because the things they said about each other and the things that they published about each other were like ferocious. So you can see that picture. It was taken 2 days ago. It looks like they're working together for ages. But just 1 month ago, 2 months ago, they were saying, like, a prime minister up to his neck in investigations has no mandate. That was Gantz saying about Netanyahu, right? And that was Netanyahu saying about Gantz, right? What are you hiding, Mr. Gantz? What does Iran know? So this hiding guy is now the minister of defense here in Israel, and Netanyahu's shadow, because by the agreement they signed, Gantz and Netanyahu are the shadow of each other. No one of them can breathe one without the other. Gantz has to ask Netanyahu if he can, like, cough, and Mr. Netanyahu has to ask Mr. Gantz if he can wash his hands. So I'm exaggerating, of course, but this is how politics work. The distrust between the two these two gentlemen is huge, and this is why they have an agreement that was never before put on the table, never before in Israeli politics. It's an agreement that changed even the laws. They had to change the law in order to make Gantz a prime minister that is already a prime minister, but not acting prime minister in Israel right now. Crazy? Don't try to understand. It's not that important. The most important thing about that is that we have a government and politics are trying somehow maybe to go back on track to a normal situation in which we were not for more than 18 months. Crazy. Try to figure out if the United States can exist for even 10 months or 5 months or 2 months without an acting government. So having said that, we still have a lot of question marks around this government because, as I said, the distrust between Netanyahu and Gantz is huge. We all know that Mr. Netanyahu is a fox, is the best fox in politics here in Israel, and Mr. Gantz is a rookie. And in spite of him being a rookie, he still managed to have half of the government in his hands, and not just ministries that are not important. He is the defense minister. Gabi Ashkenazi, number 2 in his party, is a foreign minister. And then you have the justice minister. And then you have a lot of economical ministries. He has 16, if I remember right, or 15 ministries in his hands. Almost all of his party was sworn in as ministers. They have no MKs, no member of Knesset working in the Knesset. So it's unbelievable that a guy who is a rookie, and he came into politics 18 months ago, managed to get out of Netanyahu not only half of the government and an agreement that says that Netanyahu is going to leave his office in 18 months from now, all right? This rookie is part of the decision-making apparatus here in Israel. Nobody was there for 10 years. Netanyahu was holding most of the power in Israel in his hands for many years. So I wouldn't say about Gantz. I know it's especially in the liberal camp on the left side of the political aisle, it's very fashionable and bon ton to say that Gantz, he sold everything out and he was bought by Netanyahu and he's a rookie and blah 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 blah. But I don't agree with that, because I'm looking at the stakes and what's on the table. So Mr. Gantz is there. But still, I would say that he needs to pray strong and hard in order to be and to have in 18 months from now, to have the wheel in his hands and to ride this country by his own ideology. We'll see that. We'll see about that, of course. So these guys, Mr. Ya'alon and Mr. Lapid, who were just 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, they were still Mr. Gantz's partners in politics. They ran with him for 3 times and they had great successes. They were stabbed in the back. This is how they sell it to the public. They feel that Gantz didn't have the backbone in order to stay out of the government. And Netanyahu succeeded in not only bringing him in, but also giving the legitimacy Netanyahu needed from Gantz to continue and be a prime minister in spite of his indictments. And we'll get to the indictment, I'm sure, in a few moments. Netanyahu will have to be on Sunday at the court for the first time. His trial will open. And these guys, Mr. Lapid and Mr. Ya'alon, are saying, we could have done it other way. We promised our voters, our electorate, that we are not gonna let Netanyahu be the prime minister. We ran on the ticket of only not Netanyahu, Rak lo Netanyahu. We have to send him home. This guy is a crook. He has to be indicted. He was indicted, and now he has to go his trial. Let's run on this ticket. And they ran in this ticket. And they say, we are lying to our voters if we go with Netanyahu. And Gantz is saying, and I also agree with him, I had no choice. We ran once and twice and 3 times. And the Israeli public didn't give us the power. They didn't give us the mandates enough mandates to form a government without Netanyahu, and we weren't able to send Netanyahu home. This is what Gantz is saying, and I agree with him. But Lapid is saying, listen, we could have make some kind of, magical law that will we say to Netanyahu, listen, you won't be able to run the next time because you have this indictment. So an MK with the this is BS. Excuse my French. This is totally banging your head against reality. And unfortunately, I want to say that Israelis here and on the left side are banging their heads against reality, saying, we know better. But the facts are, the figures, the numbers, they say you couldn't do it any other way. And the alternative, the other option was to run again to elections, fourth time in less than 2 years. This is crazy. Fourth time in a row. And I see it as to not only to stab the Israelis in their back, but if you add it up, all the challenges that are here in Israel at this day, if you add them up, 3 times elections, and now the coronavirus, and the economic that is going down, and the people that they are afraid of what's going to be tomorrow and what's going to happen next winter. So you cannot drag the entire nation and the entire country to another round of elections that perhaps, by the way, would be even worse for the liberal and democratic and left-wing parties. So Gantz has a point here. Gantz has a point. And these guys now are in the opposition. Now, this Mr. Lieberman, you know him. He was the king of kings for almost 1 year. Everybody was playing by his magical stick, but he lost the crown. He's in the opposition. Something went wrong. And at some point, he decided to send Mr. Netanyahu home, and therefore, his party became a natural partner for the Blue and White Party. Mr. Lieberman was for years a natural partner for Mr. Netanyahu, for the right-wing parties. And this time he said, no, I want Netanyahu to go home. He has to go home. He finished his time in Israeli politics. And this guy, that if you remember in March or in April last year, he was the guy who pulled the strings. He was the one who said, I'm not entering a government led by Netanyahu. That was first time 1 year ago, right? And then the political scene was like, whoa, what's happening here? It was like a tsunami. Lieberman is not getting in. It was crazy. So he pushed us to a second round. He got 8 mandates, and with those 8 mandates in September in the second round, he was able to do whatever he wanted. But still, again, he said to Netanyahu, no way, no way. You want to form a national unity government? Do it without the ultra-Orthodox parties. So he pulled the strings in September too. But you know how Fortuna is, right? The goddess of luck. And his luck ended. He ran out of it. And in March this year, he got his 7. But his 7 were not enough in order to influence how the government looks like. And add to that the fact that I'm sorry, I have some noises there in the background. So add to that the fact that Mr. Gantz decided not to continue and to pursue another round of elections, and Lieberman lost his magical touch. And now you have this nice couple in politics. They are not couple in life, of course. Mr. Bennett and Mrs. Shaked from the Yamina party. A totally interesting story. I can talk about them for 2 hours in a row. I can talk about them for 2 hours because they were supposed to be the next big thing in Israeli politics. They were supposed to be the next big thing on the right side of politics. But unfortunately for them, mostly for them. They weren't able to convince the Israeli public that they have the guts and the courage to be a right-wing party, but not to be in Netanyahu's pocket. So they criticized Mr. Netanyahu many times. They even said that he's weak and he gave in to Hamas and so on. But they always said, we are gonna go only with Netanyahu. And that made them actually a joke. And Netanyahu, he understood that they are afraid of him and they're afraid to lose their electoral. This is why he kicked them out. In April last year, they were totally out of the Knesset. They were on 0 mandates. And they were lucky enough to have the second chance and the third chance to try and come back. And they came back. But Netanyahu hates them. And he decided 2 years ago that he's going to erase them and kick them out. He had to deal with them in this past few months because they were in the government. He was in the government, Mr. Bennett, as a defense minister. But Netanyahu named him defense minister in September just to make him, just to bring him in the tent and not to push him towards guns, right? So the affair between Netanyahu and these two gentlemen and lady is catastrophic. And now they are in the opposition, and now they're saying that Netanyahu stabbed them in the back and blah, blah, blah. But if you really go to the core issue and you see how this party and how these two people failed to form any kind of leadership that has the guts and the courage, right, to go against Netanyahu from the right wing, you can understand how they got to the point they got. And of course, you have Mr. Peretz, the head of the Labor Party, who even shaved his mustache. That was his symbol, right? To show people that he means, read my lips, right? I'm not gonna sit with Netanyahu. Now he's the minister in his government. The Labor Party was, the party that established the state of Israel, the party that was the pillar of Israeli politics for so many years, for 65, 70 years in a row. This party, the Israeli Labor Party, is destroyed. The Israeli Labor Party is a sad shadow of what it was in the past. The Israeli Labor Party has 3 seats in the Knesset. 2 of them are already part of the blue and white bloc, and Peretz and Shmuley, his colleague, are going to be part of the blue and white party. This is what they want. They want to take the Labor Party and stick it to the blue and white party. Maybe they are right. Maybe they are right. But this is a historical moment. No more Israeli Labor Party. Just try to think about Peres and Rabin and Ben-Gurion and Barak and all the others. And Golda, and just name the names, and they are there. But this is how politics work. This guy shaved his mustache off, and he still, read my lips and did the other way around. Perhaps because he didn't have any other choice. That's the Labor. Rest in peace, Labor Party. I told you at the beginning, I gave you like a promo, that there is an elephant in the room, especially when we talk about the left-wing parties here in Israel. I'm not calling them anymore left-wing and right-wing. I'm calling them conservatives and liberals, and that's another meeting between us maybe in the future, because the Israeli system, as I see it, is going through a huge change in the past few years. It's not anymore the dichotomic split between 67 peace now or 67 building the settlements. It's like Eretz Israel versus peace now. That's over. Most of the Israelis are tired of talking about the Palestinians. The problem is not vanished, it's not going to vanish, but Israelis are tired of it. Again, every lecture that I can give you can take us 1 hour just to get into understanding what has happened here since 2005, especially after the disengagement. The Arab Party, the United Arab Party, as they call themselves today, they got 15 seats in the Knesset. 15, that's huge. Almost 400,000 people got out to vote. It's unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable. It's incomprehensible, because when you see 15 seats, you say, wow, this is democracy in motion. The Arabs wanted to have a bigger party in the Knesset. 90-something% of the Arabs in Israel, they voted for this party. Those who went to vote, they voted for them. So you're telling yourself, if they have 15 mandates, and if they went to the president, Ruby Rivlin, and they said that they advised him to let Gantz form the government, you say, wow, this is historical, because the Arabs were never in the game of forming a government. But there is a catch. And the catch is that these gentlemen that you see on the screen failed for many years to show a leadership that says, we as Israeli Arabs want to be part of the Israeli society. They were very busy to call Israeli soldiers from the IDF murderers and capo and so on. And it doesn't matter. It does not matter what Mr. Ahmed Tibi or Ayman Uda did in the Knesset vis-a-vis their electorate. It doesn't matter. The narrative that they used and the fact that they bashed on Israel every time there was a mini war or an operation in Gaza, they were busy attacking Israel and the IDF, the Tzahal, in spite of what they knew. And they knew that the terrorist organizations in Gaza were rocketing Israeli cities and kindergartens and schools, right? And in spite of that, they were blaming Israel every time. So the Jewish Israeli ear couldn't stand it anymore. And this is why, in spite of the fact that from the democratic point of view, they have the 15 mandates, more than 10% of the Knesset are Arabs. In spite of that, they do not have the legitimacy to be part of a left-wing or liberal democratic left-wing party. Because even the Jews, especially the Jews, not even the Jews, especially the Jews, they can't see them as legitimate. And if you are not legit, Benny Gantz can't work with you. And if you are not legit, two of Benny Gantz's people are gonna run away from you exactly as they did. Tzvika Hauser, right? And Yoaz Hendel from Bogi Alon's right-wing party that was melted in blue and white. So Gantz lost his 61 because two of his right-wing partners in blue and white told him, listen, we are not gonna let you go with the Arabs. Now we can criticize them as much as we want, and we can say that they are racist, and it's unacceptable. Everything may be right. And still, in Israel 2020, in a country which still has to deal almost every year with an operation, with a military operation in Gaza or in the northern part of Israel, in Lebanon or wherever, still, when you have a party that is calling your soldiers, our soldiers, killers and murderers and Nazis, right? You can blame the Israelis for saying, these guys, we don't want to see them. You can play with them. So it's complex, because from the democratic point of view, of course they can be part of the political activity and the political scene. But you can't fight the facts. You can't fight the feelings and the framing. And Netanyahu was smart enough, politically saying, to take this issue and saying it's Bibi or TB, right? And in the framing, when Israelis think about it, they think about those people who are calling Israeli soldiers murderers and killers. And this is why it's so hard. So I'm gonna finish here. Next on the agenda, this is the first important thing that we are gonna deal with, except Mr. Netanyahu's trial here in Israel, is the annexation. We do not know exactly when, how, and how much. It's on the table. Everybody's talking about it, and it's gonna turn the Israeli political scene up and down in the next few months. We're gonna talk about it a lot, or we're gonna hear from the Americans who are gonna say plain out, stop it. It's not gonna happen. It depends. At this point, Netanyahu is playing with this annexation thing because he believes that he's gonna glue his electorate from the right wing to him, and not only them, but also Israelis from the center right or center, and they are gonna say, you know what, perfect. And in spite of what I'm telling you, when you ask most of the Israelis, Jews in polls, are you for an annexation? More than 50% say no, and that's a brand new poll on this issue. Okay, so most of the Israelis, Jews, are not pro annexation because they are afraid of what's going to happen and repercussions and what's going to say. And the Europeans are attacking us already. So annexation is on the table, but the security that it will happen, as Netanyahu, wants or sees it, about that, I'm not that sure.